And we're walking in from the other side today because it's awkward. What is up, guys? So today we're actually going to be looking at another typing as far as deep dives go on typings here. Now today I did decide to go with ice, making fire our last typing that we're going to get to. But my plan is after I do the fire typing, I think by then, I would hope by then, I've basically got a really well-rounded idea of the meta and I can kind of make a what team should I be choosing as far as the Kingdom Cup goes. So here's to that. That's going to be interesting. So let's actually get started with our ice types today. For the ice typing, so I decided to kind of go in a similar way that I did with steel, where I take the bulk, the stat product, and I have a viability column here. Now you'll notice that my glare is right here, but I cleverly drew around it, so no complaints. So as far as bulk goes, out of all of the ice types available in the Kingdom Cup, we have 5 top bulky Pokemon, and Dewgong takes the cake on the bulk. So I was kind of surprised because up until even after I've done the deep dive on Lapras, I was still thinking for some reason when I started doing this that Lapras was the bulkiest ice type. But Dewgong, definitely the bulkiest. The problem with Dewgong is that he's kind of held back by his moves. Dewgong pulling up first on our bulk, then comes Regice, and Regice is kind of interesting because he's got stats and he's got all this stuff that like sets him up to really be a good Pokemon, but his moves kind of dump him in the dump. That sounded stupid. But Regice is just kind of meh. He's not really like amazing. Then we move on to Lapras, which of course we've seen that Lapras just really can hold its own. I consider it personally one of the 3 kings of the Kingdom Cup. It's definitely just, oh, it's amazing. It's so good. I can't imagine having a team without either Lapras or a very close Lapras substitute, which we'll get to, as you can see over here. Next on our bulk we do have Sealeo, and Sealeo proved itself last month in the Tempest Cup, having access to Body Slam and being able to just chuck out those moves back to back is really good. And last we have Articuno, which I don't really predict a lot of people bringing Articuno, but of course even at my cup there's always a couple of people that kind of cheese it and use some legendaries, which there's no problem in that, but I don't foresee Articuno being a big mainstay in the meta, but it is our 5th bulkiest ice type. Moving on to stat product here, Dewgong again takes the cake whenever it comes to stat product. Like I said, Dewgong is really held back by its moves, which really makes it falter quite a bit down here. We do have Lapras coming in 2nd for stat product, Regice coming in 3rd, Articuno in 4th, and we end up dropping Sealeo out of stat product, and Walrein actually becomes our 5th in stat product. So Walrein actually does have some viability, which we'll get to here in a second, but kind of interesting. Now, moving on to viability, Lapras. I feel Lapras is the best ice type in the meta. Okay? There's no way around it. I can't figure out a way to really not say that Lapras is the best. Now, me saying that he's the best does not mean you absolutely need to use Lapras, because these Pokemon do very similar jobs, just not quite as good as Lapras, and even Sealeo can beat Lapras. So I'm not trying to say that Lapras is the only Ice-type Pokemon that you should ever pick. No, I'm saying that he is the best at what he does, okay? Next we have Sealeo. And Sealeo has really proven itself to be just a dominating Pokemon, considering that it can actually end up beating Lapras in some situations. Just really says a lot about it. I mean, he's got so much going for him, it's insane. Next we have Walrein here, which Walrein's an interesting one because I feel like it's in this list because its moves just really enable it to have a decent matchup spread this month around. So Walrein is not by any means like amazing, but he's definitely got the moveset to really be good. Next we actually have Piloswine, which honestly out of these top 5, I think Piloswine's probably my favorite. Because he's the most unique, he's just totally different. And I think that Piloswine may end up actually going on my team after looking into this typing in general, just because Piloswine actually does a really good job up against some really interesting Pokemon. Last but not least, Dugong, which, like I've said, these two stats right here make Dugong in this list. His moves make him this far down in the list. So, unfortunately, Dugong does get kind of shafted when it comes to some of its moves, and it really makes it have a hard time. If it had access to Surf, it would be a totally different story. If it had access to Water Gun, it would be a totally different story. Unfortunately, not having access to some of the quicker or more damaging moves kind of just sucks. So let's actually look into these top 5 viable Pokemon and figure out why they're so viable. So if we look back into the Steel video, and we actually think that the Steel video, the reason that those top 5 viable Pokemon were there were because of their subtyping. In this instance, when we talk about ice typings, it's definitely because of the moves. So the moves that these Pokemon carry end up making them either really, really good or really, really bad. These top 5 have really, really good movesets, which ends up making them very, very viable. So I personally think that Lapras having access to Surf is really what makes it so punishing. The fact that it can just charge up Surf really fast and spam Surf over and over and over really makes it a good, bulky shield breaker, which is, as we know, that's an insane combo to have. Sealeo having access to Body Slam is in a very similar vein. It has a move that's just really, really quick, it can get it off really, really fast, and it can just shield break really quickly. And it's also extremely bulky, so it just has a lot going for it in the same vein as Lapras, but I do think that Lapras just barely inches it out and ends up being the most viable. Walrein, on the other hand, actually has access to Earthquake, and Earthquake does a big number in this meta against a lot of the Steel types and some of the oddball, like, Electric types that are running around. Mainly, it's just the Steel types that carry the Electric moves as well, like Melmetal and Magneton and all that stuff. It really ends up putting a hurting on those Pokemon, and I think Walrein is pretty good at getting there. I mean, it has a really nice little package to actually get to Earthquake and push out tons of damage. Piloswine, here's the unique one. So Piloswine actually has access to Bulldoze and Stone Edge. Yeah, so having access to both Bulldoze and Stone Edge really makes it a really good contender against a ton of unique matches. When we get into what each Pokemon really is targeted for, you'll see that Piloswine is very similar to how Flygon was in the Dragon video, where Flygon was kind of the outlier, and I was saying you don't really need to use Flygon as a dragon attacker. He's better off as a ground attacker. I think that Piloswine in the same vein is better as a rock type attacker or ground type attacker rather than he is an ice type attacker. So, and Dugong here pulling up at the very end. Dugong's unique move is Ice Shard. It is huge. Even though it's a fast move, every other Pokemon, I was talking about charge moves, even though Dugong has Ice Shard, which is a fast move, I think Ice Shard is really what sets it apart in a lot of these matchups. While Lapras does have access to Ice Shard, I think it works a little bit better on Dugong since he has the bulk and the stat product to really back up such a really good move. But unfortunately, he's kind of stuck because he doesn't have any charge moves to help back that up as well. I'm dogging a lot on Dugong. Don't get me wrong, Dugong has its place. It's very good, but I just think that it's not nearly as good as the other 4 Pokemon on this list. So let's actually get into what each Pokemon should be used for and what they all kind of have trouble with. So Lapras ends up being really good against ground, dragon, and ice types. So things like Empoleon, Steelix, Flygon, Altaria, and even Ninetales, yes, the fire types are definitely in there. It's just that those 5 Pokemon right there are Lapras's best possible matchups. So you end up having really good matchups against those 5, which kind of seems like where you should use Lapras. Definitely target more of the ground, the dragon, and some of the ice types with Lapras because a lot of them have a lot of trouble with it. Now, as far as what Lapras actually loses to, these Pokemon appear a lot in this list, and it's because most of these Pokemon carry ice and water. Abomasnow is really, really good up against a lot of these Pokemon, so I think Abomasnow could be a really good anti-meta pick against the water-ice typing. And then you have Lucario, which of course fighting type moves are going to hurt the ice typing, and Lucario being, you know, Power Punch King and all that. Magnezone is a good one because Magnezone ends up having electric type moves just like Melmetal does. Magnemite actually is one of the best matchups up against Lapras. It has one of the best ratings against the Lapras, which is just crazy to think about. And then Fortress also has really good matchups against Lapras as well. But I think a lot of that is because we end up falling to grass, fighting, electric, and some steel types. Because of our water and grass typing, some of the Pokemon that carry steel type can get to us if we're not careful. And really depending on like where you are in the match and how much shields you have, it could end up being a really bad time for you. Moving on to Sealeo here. Sealeo is actually really good up against ground, dragon, and ice as well. But I actually think that Sealeo probably does a little bit better against some of the ice types rather than Lapras. And I think Lapras kind of trades off and does a little bit better at the fire typing than Sealeo does. So you kind of get like, which one do you need more? If you have problems with ice as is, then Lapras wouldn't really work for you. You really kind of want to go with Sealeo. Even though Lapras can do good against ice, Sealeo I think inches out just a little bit better. But Sealeo falls a little bit back in terms of fire damage output, so you really want Lapras to be able to cover those fire types rather than Sealeo. But Sealeo does really good up against Walrein, Flygon, Typhlosion, Empoleon, and Dragonair there. You can kind of see there that Sealeo does really good up against a little bit of a different scene there. Now, as far as what we actually end up losing to, so here again, these are kind of similar. Abomasnow, Lucario, Magneton, Melmetal, and Lairon all end up showing up. So grass types are really hard to overcome. Electric, fighting, and steel, of course, again here, do end up giving Sealeo a bad time. Moving on to Walrein though, so Walrein actually got a little bit more interesting. So Walrein got really good against ground and fire. That's kind of it though. Of course he does have matchups that are outside of that scope, but his best targets are ground and fire. He wins against things like Flygon, Charizard, Typhlosion, Blaziken, and even Magcargo, and he does really well up against those. Now, what he loses to, of course, here is very, very similar. He actually ends up losing to Abomasnow, and he loses to Sealeo, actually, which is interesting. Registeel, Lucario, and Fortress there. So, again, grass-type moves, steel types, and fighting types all end up doing a number on Walrein. But he has a little bit of a different use case than the previous two, so you can kind of see where they start to branch off and start to differentiate themselves. Here's the interesting one, Piloswine. So Piloswine does really good up against ground types, steel types, and flying types in the meta. So it actually beats things like Flygon, Probopass, Bastiodon, Altaria, and Charizard. And listen to those five. These are the top 5 matchups for Piloswine in its favor. Flygon, really, really respected meta pick. Probopass, second best to Bastiodon if it ever comes out. It's going to be huge. Bastiodon itself, one of the kings. Altaria, the best dragon. And Charizard. I mean, those names are huge. That's saying a lot. That Piloswine can actually beat those in this meta is saying a lot. Now, what it actually loses to, so it actually ends up losing to a lot of the ice types here. So Sealeo, Lapras, Walrein, Cloyster, and Empoleon all end up giving Piloswine a really hard time. So here again, it falls to a lot of the ice types, which is our subject today, whereas Flygon fell to a lot of the dragon types in that video. You see, they're very similar in a lot of ways, but I think that Piloswine is probably the most interesting choice out of these 5. Next, let's talk about Dugong. So Dugong, mainly having ice-type moves, makes it a big focus for both dragons and flying-type Pokemon. It actually ends up winning against things like Flygon, Altaria, Shelgon, Dragonair, and even Skarmory. It does have a very favorable matchup against Skarmory, which is good. So, the things that it loses to, though, are Magnezone, Lucario, Abomasnow, Typhlosion, and Blaziken. So you end up having this really awkward set of losses there. Electric types, fighting types, grass types, and a lot of the neutral damage that's in the meta ends up giving Dewgong a lot of problems because it only really has a lot of ice output. It doesn't have a ton of water output. It ends up losing to a ton of the neutral matchups, which kind of sucks. Out of all of that, what do you need to take away? Well, Lapras is king. I'm not going to deny that. I will stick to that. That is going to be my statement. Lapras is the king of ice. But there are places where he doesn't do as good as Sealeo. There are places where he doesn't do as good as Piloswine. So you kind of have to figure out for your team composition which Pokemon make the most sense. For something that I want to run, I honestly think that the way that things are looking, I'm going to end up having to build a completely anti-meta team, which sucks. But it's going to be really fun because it's almost a challenge in itself to come up with an anti-meta team and then to turn around and beat the meta. That was kind of what I used to play in like Yu-Gi-Oh! And stuff like that. So I'm really comfortable playing that type of stuff. It's very up my alley. But this month's going to be interesting because I don't know how that's going to go. I definitely think that you should take away these top 5 Pokemon right here are your best ice types in my opinion. And I think that kind of mix and matching whichever ones that you fit well into your team, I think that they all do really well in their respective fields. If you are seriously lacking a ton of ice, Dewgong makes the most sense there. Having access to the most ice type moves, it does really, really good. If you're lacking bulk and you need water type moves, Lapras makes the most sense. If you don't want to run Lapras, if you feel like Lapras is going to be there a lot, then Sealeo makes a lot of sense because Sealeo can end up beating Lapras. So it kind of depends on what your team composition really needs and what you are trying to achieve on your team. I definitely do think out of these top 5, you should have a really good start where to look and what to start building on. But that is just my take, guys. I'd love to hear yours down below. Please let me know what you think. I'm so excited to get the fire type video and then mash all these together and say like these are your top 20 Pokemon and then have all those Pokemon just mashed together and try to make a team out of all 20. Like, oh, it's going to be so much fun. It's going to be really cool. I'm kind of excited for that. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for hanging out. I really do appreciate it. If you guys have any Pokemon that you're looking forward to a deep dive on, please let me know down in the comments below. I'll add it to the spreadsheet and we'll get working on it as soon as I can. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like to like videos, make sure you do that. If you don't, you can be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in those comments below. And until our next video, I will catch you then.